To not be first.
Do we do enough? Well, I never shut up about it.
It must have been about 16, 17. We nicked their guilt rings. Right, the bouncer's guilt rings.
This is no good for me. That's the reality. If you want the honest truth, and I see it every day.
This is Colm mcguigan for IFL TV. Delighted to be joined by Eddie Hearn in Orlando. Eddie, we'll get to this card in a second, but I need to get your response to Robert Smith's comments today. They seem a bit strange because you and Frank both told me yesterday in interviews that the board cleared this with the ABC, was it? And that Conor was cleared to fight. Now he comes out saying something completely different. Where's this came from?
Well, I think it's a play on words. I just spoke to, Andy Pirol there, and, Robert Smith says he believes that Conor Benn hasn't cleared his name. What they should have asked him is Conor Benn cleared to box? Because the answer is yes. And that's the reason that he's fighting this weekend. He said that he's spoken to the commissions. If he wasn't cleared to box, Robert Smith would have said to the commissions, no, he's not cleared to box. He's suspended. We know he's not because he won his case against the board and against UKAD. And, I think it's a lot of emotion in these interviews. And it's still very strange that the Secretary of the British Boxing Board of Control is going on with Simon Jordan talking about this. It's quite baffling, but we've come to expect it now. Conor Benn has been through every process that's been asked of him. He is, as I said, cleared to box because he's fighting on Saturday. Don't know what else to say, don't know what else to tell you other than that he'll fight on Saturday, and then we will plan his December fight. Now, if he's not ever cleared to box, he will not be able to box, and that will be a separate conversation. But I think a bit of a play on words there from Robert, but I get, again, a lot of emotion. They lost the case. They want to appeal. If they are going to, let's speed that up, because we would have actually waited if that appeal was. Don't forget that they requested the appeal. Was it back in July or August? So, we're nearly coming up to the end of September. So, I just did a 40-minute interview arguing about cleared his name, cleared. What do you expect Conor Benn to do? Just sit and wait?
It's getting to the point, though, that everyone's bored of talking about this. The fans are listening to it daily. You're talking about it.
To be honest with you, Colm, that's one of the reasons you go ahead and fight. Because if, hopefully, he goes out there and looks sensational on Saturday night, you know what's coming. It's the Chris Eubank fight. It's one of the biggest fights in world boxing. And sooner or later, people are going to have to say, look, he's done what's been asked of him, and he hasn't boxed for 18 months. It's time. We believe that time is now. His options, having won that case and having been cleared and not suspended, is just to sit and wait for a potential hearing that may never happen. And, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that the decision from the first hearing came on the final day that decision could be made, and the appeal came on the final day that could be made. So if you don't think there's a slow playing going on here, then, and I think Conor Benn just looked at it and spoke to lawyers and team and said, am I allowed to box? Am I cleared to box? Yes, you are. Your suspension was lifted. And he went, okay, I'm going to box. And it's as simple as that.
Does it get to the point, though, that you believe that there might be an agenda against Matchroom? Because this is, you and Frank both kind of...
against Matchroom or Conor, but it just doesn't really make sense, because we've had other fighters fail tests and no one's really even mentioned it. Yet you've got this as literally every day for a year. There's been an interview, there's been a soundbite, and...
But how much longer does the documents need to remain confidential? For example, no one speaks about the B sample. No one talks about...
That's the process. That's not Conor Benn's process. We don't want to breach a confidentiality. But at the same time, people talk about, oh, this should happen and that should happen. But he's done everything. When he finished the WBC hearing and he went out and he got reinstated into the rankings, everyone said, oh, yeah, but he's done the WBC, but he needs to go through UKAD and the British Boxing Board of Control. I actually didn't think he necessarily would do that. But he turned around and he said, no, do you know what? I will go through that because that's what people want me to do. So he went through that case and he won that case. Right? And then everyone's like, oh yeah, but hang on a minute, he hasn't really cleared his name. It's like, I wasn't on that hearing, but that's the case to answer to. Do you know what I mean? Like, at what point do you go, he's done what's been asked and he's been cleared to fight? Like, And you know what Robert Smith said, he hasn't cleared his name. Well, that's your opinion. Our opinion is different. But one thing is for sure, he's cleared. As I keep saying,
Why is there this discrepancy between the fact that you and Frank have both said, the whole team has basically said he's cleared to fight this week, he's cleared to box, right? But he comes out today on TalkSport. What is the benefit of Robert Smith doing that today?
I've never seen it before in my 14 years of promoting, and I would think my father, through his Hall of Fame career before, where someone with such, you know, and we talk about, you know, in my opinion, an agenda in Simon Jordan and those guys, will get the secretary of the British Boxing Board of Control on the phone to basically try and, you know, and it's the whole thing is, again, just my opinion, it doesn't make sense because you've got other fighters that have, no one's even mentioned a word about it.
Is it because of the fact that when this is spoke about, for example, the confidentiality side of it, which I get from a legal perspective, but this B sample, no one's ever really spoke about it. Why?
Because we're part of a confidential process. Again, Colm, like, I don't set the rules of a confidential process. UCAD, there's a strict confidential process of, and if you breach that, you've breached the confidentiality of the case. We've got supposedly an appeal coming up. We'll see whether that happens, what happens, but from our point of view, Conor, you know, and you know, you heard my interview, you know, with Andy. Conor has produced this scientific evidence in the past. It's not like he's just kept it like under his bed or something. But when that's asked to be produced, he's produced it every time. If you go and read Matt Lawton's piece in the Times, you'll see a very, very in-depth article about one of the reasons why we believe Conor Benn is innocent. So it's not like, oh, we're not telling you. But when you go into a trial like he did with UCAD, he's done everything he was asked to do and he won. So, like, what they should have said in that interview is he cleared to box? And under their rules, if you're not suspended, if you're not fined, if you're not banned, you are cleared to box.
But who at the British Boxing Board of Control was the one that, whenever the ABC contacted, they said, yeah, he's fine, he's cleared to box?
I have no idea, but I mean, he said he spoke to the commissions, but what they would have said to him is Conor Benn suspended? Is he cleared to box? And he would have said, yeah, he's not suspended. So, like, I get that you're not happy that he's fighting, but also just tell the truth, which is he's allowed to box anywhere in the world because he's not suspended. Now, if there's an appeal and he loses the appeal and he's suspended, all of a sudden he's not cleared to box. So again, like, it's the most, not boring debate, but it's like, I don't know what else to say. Like, Conor Benn has two choices, right? Having won the case, was it July or August? July. Having won the case in July and having won the case and having the suspension lifted and having been cleared, he has the choice to fight or to wait for a potential appeal, which we know through all the slow playing previously could be kicked into next year. He hasn't boxed for 18 months. What he's spent in terms of scientific reports, in terms of legal costs, you know, the man needs to go back to work. So when you win, you know, and I said to someone the other day, just as an example, something happens to you, Colm, right? You get accused of something, or you get a bit of bad luck, or, you know, could be anything, and you're not allowed to work, right? You're 18 months in, you haven't earned a penny. And you've been fighting this case, you've been trying to produce evidence, you've been speaking to your lawyers, you've been spending money to try and clear your name. And the big hearing comes, and you win. And they go, congratulations, you're now free to go back to work. And you go, okay. And then they come back 2 weeks later and say, no, we're going to appeal this at some time. We just go back and sit on your sofa. You're free to work. And that's what Conor Benn is. It's a restraint of trade if you don't let him fight. He won the case. So, you know, now I completely understand if he didn't win the case and he was suspended, we wouldn't even be having this conversation because I couldn't even justify it, really. And by the way, the ABC, Florida, Texas, they wouldn't have even considered him to fight. But it's not, is it? So, like, yeah.
Does it get to the point, though, after this fight, everyone's sick of it? I'm sure, like, you're blue in the face talking about it.
That's one of the reasons, what I said to you earlier, it's one of the reasons that fighting is actually going to benefit him, because it's happening.
But can you sit down and say next week with the board, let's get in a room together, sort this out, give me a time for...
have those conversations.
Why though? It doesn't make sense.
Tell me. Tell me, every time we request a meeting or a conversation, it's speak to our lawyers. And it's unbelievably frustrating.
But is it not within their benefit to put this to bed, not incur more legal costs if they've...
But also, if you've got a chip on your shoulder, if if there's ego, and there's probably ego from both sides. Conor Benn, I don't think Conor Benn would probably like to have a British Boxing Board of Control licence again. I mean, there's a lot of fighters, very high profile, that have been through arguments with the British Boxing Board of Control and chosen to be licensed in America. But I want Conor Benn to be licensed in Britain. And we wouldn't do a show without the British Boxing Board of Control. We respect them. We know they have a difficult job. We don't always agree with them. But after this fight, we are going to put in an application either for a licence or for permission to box for Conor Benn in December.
Does that mean that the appeal process needs to be streamlined to happen very soon then?
For them to say no to him boxing legally, probably, yeah. I mean, but we're happy for the appeal. Listen, if the appeal was next week, we'd be so happy. Because we win that appeal and then finally everything's done. But we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, because since it was confirmed that the appeal was taking place, we've heard nothing. So,
We'll move on to this card as a whole, Eddie. Obviously, the addition of Conor brings additional eyes, but there's a really, really good fight on the card in Richardson Hitchens Zepeda that people are now kind of forgetting about a little bit. The winner of this fight, where can they go next?
Well, I think that with Zepeda, you've got a guy who had a very close fight with Ramirez. Some people thought that he won that fight. Had a great fight with Regis Prograis. And then you've got Richardson Hitchens, who in his mind is the truth. The kid on the block at 140 pounds that's going to go on and beat everybody. He's come through the blind side. He's a Mayweather Promotions fighter that everybody talked about in the amateurs. He was an Olympian. And he's 16-0. And if he beats Zepeda in style, all of a sudden you've got to be talking about him as one of those guys that's going to go on and have a big fight. Whether that's for World Championship. I mean, last night he told me he wants the winner of Haney Prograis. How many fights, once you beat a Zepeda, how many fights are you actually away from a shot? This is really the fight to get you a shot. So I think we're going to learn a lot about Richardson Hitchens on Saturday night. And, in terms of his, in terms of how good he is and how true the hype is and how real the hype is.
Is the fight with Montana Love completely dead? Because it's kind of just fizzled out. What's the story there with Montana Love?
He got injured and we tried to actually reschedule it for this date, but he wasn't ready for this date, and now, it's been delayed. And I'm not saying that we've missed the boat on that fight, but certainly, we have to think about Richardson Hitchens, and he wasn't the one that was injured. He gets a chance against Zepeda, and if he shines on Saturday night, he may be looking beyond Montana Love. But certainly with the history and the bad blood, that's definitely a fight that will always have legs.
Sandy Ryan, a Brit over here, trying to take over in America against McCaskill. How do you feel that goes?
I think it's a great fight. I mean, that great mixture between, obviously, Clifton and Rick Ramos as well. And I think it's a real credible, top female fight. Like, McCaskill sometimes doesn't probably get the credit she deserves. Don't forget, she boxed Katie Taylor for the lightweight world title, gave her a great fight. She was the unified champion at 140. She was undisputed at 147. And Sandy Ryan's just in her 8th fight. I mean, Parsons told me, which you certainly have to check up on, that this is, a fight that would see her become the fastest lineal champion.
I told him that, the little shit.
I like it anyway. I'm going to go with it. So 8 fights. But, I think when you look at the career of Sandy Ryan, you have to give her unbelievable props, because she lost her 3rd fight in a fight that maybe she shouldn't took at the time, but she wanted to fast track herself into the big fights. And I think that moment when she lost that fight changed everything from her. Sometimes you'd see her at the fights look a little bit fleshy or be a pound over on the weigh-in day, and then all of a sudden after that fight everything changed. She locked herself away, she took herself away from social media, and she's completely dedicated herself and her life to her craft, which is inspiring to see. And as a promoter, you want that from a fighter. You want to know that the fighter you're investing in is giving the sport 110%, and she's never looked back after that defeat. So that's also a lesson to young fighters as well. Don't be afraid to take chances early on. You can come back from it. You never want to lose. But if you do lose, look at what Sandy Ryan has done. And, she can become a massive star of the sport on Saturday night, but she's against a very, very tough, rugged, strong opponent. I think it's going to be a war.
Could you see a fight with Natasha Jonas materialising, or is that relationship with Boxer kind of a little different now after what's gone on?
Yeah, it's a shame really, because you would hope that any fighter wants to become undisputed. And that's what Natasha's done is unbelievable. I know it's at 154, but she won world titles there. She unified, and then she moved down and won a world title at 147. So if whoever wins on Saturday night, Jessica and Sandy, they could fight Natasha for the undisputed welterweight championship. We also know that that's probably unlikely because of some people's, mindset. But it still baffles me that we never did Natasha Jonas against Terry Harper for the undisputed at 154. So if she doesn't fight the winner of this fight, she's lost the opportunity to fight for undisputed at 154 and undisputed at 147. Why? Because she doesn't like me or Steffi Bull or Joe don't like it's rubbish, really. She deserves a shot at undisputed. But the winner of this is going to have all the belts. It's going to be the lineal champion, if that's a thing. The Ring Magazine champion is definitely a thing. So, I'm saying they're going to hold the aces, but you know what I'm saying? All of a sudden, she had all the belts, but won at 154. Now she's got one belt and needs all the other belts. So, this puts Sandy in a fantastic position, and, it's a great fight. It's going to be a brutal one.
Lastly, the Boxer situation with Conor Benn, you talked a little bit about it with me yesterday. In terms of that situation, why do you feel that they approached Conor Benn after everything that's been said?
Because they'll be wanting to hold on to Chris Eubank. Chris Eubank's out of contract with Sky and Boxer, or if he was even under contract with Boxer, I don't know, but he's with Wasserman. So Sky's boxing is completely driven by pay-per-view. And if you're Sky right now, you're looking at your pay-per-view offerings that have happened over the last couple of years, and with the guarantees they've had to put up, they're actually showing probably a net loss on their pay-per-view over the last 2 years, which is vastly different to when we were there. But if you're Sky and you're looking at, okay, what's our next pay-per-view? Tell me the next pay-per-view on Sky from the Boxer stable. So they really need Eubank, and they don't have him. They don't have him under contract. So they're going to try and make moves. Conor Benn has over a year left on his contract with us. He's completely exclusive to Matchroom and DAZN. They cannot make that fight. If we allowed them to, and we spoke with Conor, and we all felt that was the thing to do, we have that conversation. But
you're getting whisked away, so we'll get you tomorrow.
Cheers, mate.
You to not be first.
Do we do enough? Well, I never shut up about it.
It must have been about 16, 17. We nicked their guilt rings. Right, the bouncer's guilt ring.
This is no good for me. That's the reality. If you want the honest truth, and I see it every day.